right. Welcome to Throwing the Brick. I'm your host, Jamie Dubuque, and today I'm so lucky I get to sit down with Bill Evans. Bill, thanks so much for being here.
No problem. Appreciate you having me on.
It was so great, the coverage between, I know some people were kind of griping about the quality of the video footage that was happening at States yesterday at the NJSIAA Girls States. But between that and then the coverage that you were also giving, I think that it was so great because fans couldn't just be there.
Right.
So it was so great to be able to watch and to get those holes filled in by your coverage. So thanks so much for giving us all that info.
Oh yeah, no problem. I mean, we were able to get a camera on every mat, and then if you went on track wrestling or something, you could kind of follow along to see who was coming up, so you could kind of navigate to your mat, and then obviously we would have the stories after. So hopefully that kept people informed.
So did you feel like there was still? I mean, it's at the end of the day, COVID or not, it's still New Jersey States. Do you feel like the energy was palpable in the gym?
Yeah, I mean, it was different because it was only parents, as far as fans went, so it wasn't a large crowd, but you could hear it. There was some noise. There was obviously a lot of emotion on the mat. Definitely a different kind of scenario. Where we were at Phillipsburg High School instead of Atlantic City, and the way that they did it, there wasn't that buildup. Usually this is contested over 2 or 3 days, and here it was almost like a senior level event, right? The whole bracket was competed in 4 hours, so it was definitely different. But yeah, there was definitely a lot of emotion. There was the girls who were there and who won were definitely happy that they had an opportunity to be state champs and state place winners.
Yeah, and it's interesting because even though it did have to play out all in a single day, I mean, it is later obviously than when states normally takes place. And a lot of these females wake up today and start continuing their journey to Fargo, which feels like it's kind of just around the corner. So a lot of these, I remember yesterday because Chloe Ayers, this is her last state tournament, and she posted on Instagram and said, "RIP folk style," because that's the last time she's ever, going to wrestle folk style. And so for a lot of these girls, they finish with states and then they turn right around and they pick back up their freestyle training that maybe they've put off a little bit as they've prepared for the state tournament. So just, it was a lot of hard work to get them there, and it being later in the school year than normal. I think, maybe it was beneficial that it was over one day instead of a couple, but who knows?
Yeah, for sure. And then a lot of these girls too who were multi-sport athletes now get to jump in the softball or track or whatever else that they get to do. So that was another benefit, even though it was later in the year that they moved the girls tournament up, 2 weeks before the boys, because they felt a lot of girls were probably going to jump right into their spring sports on Monday.
Right. So let's break it down kind of by like the first session and then the second session. So first session notes, I'm thinking about Kira Pipkin's match. So Kira comes out, she's a sophomore out of Bloomfield. She wins her match. So now she's possibly on track to be the first 4-time state champion in New Jersey girls history. And the best thing is she ends it with a backflip. So I thought that was so great. And for what it's worth, Gable Steveson has to get a little bit of a running start, and Kira just stood up and did the backflip.
Gable weighs about 130 pounds more, so he probably needs that running start.
Yeah, so I know, I mean, she's been big on the freestyle scene for a while, obviously. I know I've announced a few matches and she's been there. So I think that everybody was expecting her to go in and do what she did well. But, doing this as a sophomore, were there any other young standouts to you?
There were some pretty good freshmen there, none that won, but Riley Lerner from Cedar Creek, she's a freshman. She got pinned by Chloe in the state final and got teched by her last week in the region final, but she won a couple tournaments this year. She won the Bergen County tournament, and I mean she looks really impressive. She dominated her semifinal against another freshman, which was Lennox Horsberg from Bound Brook. There was a freshman from Kitatini, Liliana Zaku Ramos, that she pinned Ava Rose, and who was a state finalist last year in the quarters, and that was one of the biggest upsets of the day. So yeah, there were a couple of young girls that really kind of stood out, that kind of made their mark this year, and look like they're probably the future of girls wrestling in New Jersey.
Now, speaking of Chloe, so what a week Chloe Ayers has had. So she announces her commitment to pursue her college career at Princeton University, and then she turns around and she becomes the first person, boy or girl, to be, well, I'm sorry, she becomes the first girl to be a three-peat champion, and she becomes, I think it was like the 32nd person in New Jersey history to be a three-peat champion as well.
Yeah, big week for her, and going to Princeton, kind of such a Chloe move to come, obviously, because it's not an established program, but they're building something there. So just like she was kind of on the forefront of girls wrestling in New Jersey on the high school level, she's going to try to continue and be on the forefront of, building that girls program at Princeton. And I thought that was one of the big things coming into this week, which I wrote about, was her and Jessie Johnson from Manalapan, who also won her third title. Sydney Petzinger didn't get to wrestle because she was hurt, but she could have had she would have actually maybe faced Chloe here because they were at the same weight this year for the first time. And, Gabby Miller won her second after winning as a freshman 2 years ago. But New Jersey was so fortunate, I think, to have, when they started girls wrestling, to have girls like that, who were still young, Chloe and Jessie and Sydney, and then Jewel Gonzalez, who just graduated but was able to be a two-timer. And you have Chloe, who, obviously, her family is well known, Jewel being from Phillipsburg, which is such a hot spot for wrestling. And then those girls came out with a lot of experience and showed that, for anybody that wondered what the quality would be, that there were some girls who were extremely talented, and they really kind of carried that banner for the last 2 or 3 years.
Do you think now, like, as more high schools across the state are starting to create actual women's programs, do you anticipate a time when possibly New Jersey Girls States will be freestyle instead of folk style, or do you think that won't change?
That's a good question, because obviously, on every other level, pretty much the girls are freestyle. I think it will probably stay folk style. I haven't talked to a lot of people about that, but I think just from a standpoint of keeping it consistent with the boys, the officials kind of knowing one style, I guess they would also have to learn the freestyle rules if they're, not as familiar or haven't officiated any kind of matches, scorekeeping as well. I mean, just maybe not as much for the girls itself, but all the outside parts that kind of go into it. I think it will probably stay folk style.
Yeah, it's funny, like it complicates things. I mean, in New Jersey, I think that the access to clubs to be able to train in freestyle is prevalent, right? It's there, and even in like the tri-state area. But I'm originally from the Midwest, and even though the landscape is definitely changing, out there as well. If you're a girl who's wrestling and you don't have the means financially, travel wise, or whatever it might be, to get to a freestyle training situation, you're kind of at a disadvantage in some ways when you go to, if you were to try to go to a larger tournament and get your name out there, because you may have only had folk style experience at that point, and you're going to go out no matter how good you are and face girls who are training almost exclusively in freestyle, aside from maybe their wrestling season at their school. So, but I think you bring up a lot of good points. And I also think about how even now, there are some legacy coaches who are running some of these high school programs who do great things with folk style wrestling, but may not have that edge in freestyle wrestling. Exactly. So I think that you're bringing up a lot of good points there. Definitely.
Yeah, and I think what might happen, I'll be interested to see, and I kind of wrote about this a couple months ago, is just how much wrestling has evolved within the pandemic. And you see so many of these other tournaments going on. I know you announced one of the summit events, with the PRTC, and that was a freestyle event even for the high school kids. So I guess they might have these off-season opportunities maybe to compete in freestyle that maybe they didn't have in the past.
Yeah. And it's, and for at certain levels of it, it's some way to make it more financially viable for you once you're in the college level, or
Right.
beyond, that you have some alternative, to being able to do this stuff. I think that that's something that, that the pandemic has actually served really well, is the opportunity to compete more, especially locally,
Right.
and the opportunity to even make some money possibly, on the senior level. All right, so let's talk. You mentioned that you had like a best first session matchup. You said it was between Chloe Lawler and Kiara Montoya. Can you talk a little bit about that match?
Yeah, Chloe ended up winning that 15-14. It was one of those crazy back and forth matches that, it's obviously the first session. Sometimes you're not really kind of paying attention to one particular mat. You're just kind of scanning to see what's going on. And that one, it started to get a lot of reaction because there was a lot of back and forth, a lot of back points. Kiara had put her on her back and looked like, she had her close to being pinned, was up 3 with about 30 seconds left. And then Chloe was able to get a reversal and back points and win it 15-14. So that was a pretty exciting match.
Yeah. It's neat too, because again, like I'm used to seeing those high scores in a freestyle match, but not
Right.
always in folk style. So to see, these girls go out there and really run up the score, it was exciting.
It's harder. It's actually harder in folk style because freestyle, you go out, you get a leg lace, you roll them 3 times, all of a sudden you got 8 points. But in folk style, you can only get 3 backs, and then you have to reset and switch to a different move. So it's definitely harder to get put up 29 points in a folk style match.
Yeah. So, all right. So let's talk about second session. So second session, we have this like North and South region showdown between Jayla Hahn and Holder, right?
Right.
And Jayla Hahn comes from Damian Hahn legacy kind of
Sure.
thing. So her name's been out there, but she's definitely paved her own way in the sport. So Jayla Hahn, kind of like another fun come from behind match, like you were just talking about, comes from behind, earns the stall point in the last few seconds, but doesn't settle with just the stall point.
Right.
Ends up, securing a takedown and winning on her own, kind of on her own volition there in that match. So, and I kind of heard the fans going wild for that
Right.
one.
That was probably the best match of the day. And Holder, I was kind of looking back and doing some research on her, and over the last 2 years, I guess she's a jiu-jitsu kind of background. So she had 37 wins and 35 were by pin. She'd never actually, and the other 2 were like by injury default and like medical forfeit. So she'd never actually won a 6-minute match in 2 years. And she's just, one of my colleagues had done a story on her like a week ago, and she said, "I don't shoot." She's just strictly a thrower, like such a unique wrestler. But it's worked for her. I mean, she gets a lot of pins and she gets them fast. And Jayla came out and was kind of staying low the whole time. She didn't want to get caught with a headlock or anything up her body. And she still got taken to her back once and almost to her back another time, and just had the athleticism to roll through. So it ended up like 8-6 going into the third. Jayla got out on the escape, and it was a really strange third period because they were going at each other so much in those first 2 periods, and they were both super conservative in the third period. Jayla was a little nervous because she almost got thrown like 3 times, and Jody, I think, was trying to protect the lead, which he's never done. And so it kind of became, they were just kind of circling and waiting. And then, obviously I think that stall point woke both of them up a little bit. And all of a sudden they started going after each other. But it was a great match between 2 great wrestlers. They're both back next year, and we'll see if they're at the same weight class, but they're 2 of the most exciting wrestlers in the state. And, I was really looking forward to that one.
Yeah, it was great. Like you were saying, in the first 2 periods, Holder definitely in my eyes was the aggressor, and was kind of going after Hahn. And then, but every time that she would get in, Hahn seemed to come out with a reversal.
Right.
So that, made them kind of stay neck and neck. But you're right. Then third period, it was almost like they both had realized what was on the line there.
Yeah.
So that was such a great match.
Fantastic. And it was a good weight class too, because Hahn had beaten Alexis Rosano in the semis. Rosano was a defending state champ last year. Her and Hahn had wrestled twice. Hahn beat her at the regions. Rosano beat her in the states, and then went on to win the state title. And then they had wrestled in February at one of those off-season events, and Han had won that too. And then when you got to the third place match, Alexa Firestone from Kingsway, whose brother Zach was a state champion at Clearview, she was down 12-0 and ended up pinning Rosano to take third. So there were a lot of great wrestlers in that weight class. It was really deep, and there were a lot of exciting matches.
Yeah. Kingsway was definitely, on my radar watching this year. I'm excited to see what the future is for that program because they were exciting.
They got their first state champ, Cat Bot, but they, when you talk about programs that were at the forefront of New Jersey girls wrestling, when they started it 3 years ago, as you know, like a lot of programs, they had maybe 2 or 3 girls that kind of trickled out, or maybe even one in certain situations. They had over 40 girls to start that first year. Farid Syed, who's their girls coach, they're one of the only programs that actually has a designated girls coach because of the numbers. He went through and he recruited a ton of girls to come out that first year, to the point where they had to basically have their own program. Most of these girls are training and drilling with the boys. They have designated girls practices, and so they've had huge numbers. They've had a few girls that have gotten the states, but obviously they broke through this year with a state champion. But they're in that school, which also is one of the best boys programs in the state. Wrestling's really big, and the girls there are willing to come out and be a part of it. Yeah,
I'm not sure about the numbers, but Trenton is like another program where, man, it was, if you build it, they will come kind of situation. The girls, the number of girls in the Trenton program is big. It's big.
Trenton. It's been a lot of teams, and Rancocas Valley's had a number of wrestlers. Delran, obviously, Emma Terra is a 2-time state champ there, but they have good numbers. Pensawkins actually developed a really good girls program. So a lot of those, what you would maybe consider northern south or lower central Jersey schools, have started to pick up on it.
Yeah. All right. So 161 pounds, we got another north-south region showdown. We've got Kiara Hubmaster and Jessie Johnson, like you'd mentioned earlier. So Jessie Johnson at that point has pinned her way to state finals, from regions to quarters to semis. It's 20 seconds to go in the first period, and Johnson gets the pin. So at that point, we now know that we've got 2 girls in a single state tournament who are now 3-peats. It was so exciting to see.
Yeah, she and Hubmasters, she's been around a couple of years and has made a couple state runs. So she was a worthy opponent. It wasn't that was, you kind of figured maybe that would have been a closer match, but as you said, Jessie's so good. I remember obviously had heard about her sophomore year, and then she got caught and pinned in a region tournament, which was such a big surprise. It was like 20 seconds in. I think it might have been like, I think it was a reversal, and then a quick call, but that was the last match she lost in her whole career. She's been dominant. She came back that year. She won the state title as a sophomore, and then she's kind of rolled through the competitions the last few years, and she'll be off to Lock Haven to continue her career.
Yeah, it's so funny because I remember when Ronda Rousey was really, really taking MMA by storm, and everybody knew she had like the one signature move. And everybody knew that, like, that's how you're good, when people know what's coming and still can't defend against it. And I think about that when I think of a girl like Jessie Johnson, who is like a pin master here, like can pin from different situations and everything like that, and yet you still just can't stop it from coming.
She's so long and lean, and just has such great leverage, and obviously she's so technically skilled that once she gets somebody down and in a position to get the fall, she's usually going to finish it.
Yeah. So then at 215, right? I think sometimes I think that first off, I want to say that I think that the heavier weights, the landscape is changing. The athleticism that we're starting to see even at bigger weight classes across the board, all the way up through the collegiate and senior level. But I think that when you get to a heavier match, you're kind of expecting a lot of pushing, a lot of back and forth. And then here comes Mia Lazars, who earns the pin with less than a second to go in the first period to become a state champion.
And her interesting story, she wrestled in the first ever girls state final 2 years ago. They started the championships at 180 pounds, which she was wrestling at that year. So her and Erin Emery actually contested, Erin Emery's Teaneck contested that first state final, and Mia lost. And then last year, she wrestled one tournament in January and then was injured and couldn't compete in the postseason. So she was back this year, up a weight, and finally got that state title. She wasn't able to make history as the first state champ. I mean, she still made history being in the first state final, but actually, was able to get that championship that eluded her.
Yeah, and I think that you could see, like, I remember watching her right after she won, and I think that the culmination, like the journey that had gotten her to that point, you could definitely see it. I mean, it was like, a long time coming.
It was so much emotion, yeah, for her. I'm trying to think if there was anybody else that actually like reacted to that degree. I mean, JLo was obviously very emotional. It was the last second takedown, but I had written about Emma Matera. She just kind of got up and took her leg,
like it was a regular match.
Like it was a regular match. I'm wait, like there was no, and then all of a sudden she smiled, like it finally hit her. Oh yeah, I just won a state title. But yeah, for me, it was instantaneous.
Yeah. Emma, it's funny. So I teach at the district where Emma Matera goes to school,
Okay.
and I can testify that is just Emma's personality, the most even keel, chill
Right.
kid ever, So wasn't surprised to see that kind of reaction from her. Oh man, that's great. And she's another one where she started in the middle school. She started, I can't remember if she started right at 7th grade or maybe if she started at 8th. But anyway, she started at the middle school level and has worked her way up. And, just kind of a testament to how much she believes in the sport and wants to contribute. If you are at like a larger scale tournament, maybe like something at Princeton University or whatever, and they're running something, it's not uncommon to see Emma and her mother manning, track wrestling or doing something to help score or running tables, whatever needs to be done. Emma Matera and her mother are there. So it was so exciting to see her, win yesterday. It was awesome.
Yeah, she's had a good run. I think she was a place winner as a freshman, and then one last year. She knocked off Gabby Miller, who was a returning state champ, and then this year they were different weight classes, and Emma kind of dominated most of the year. Yeah, she got a lot of matches, more than most during the year. Delran did a good job of getting her a good schedule, and she came in. She struggled, not I don't want to say struggled, but in the region final, she wrestled the girl from Bordentown, who she was very familiar with, and it was a kind of a lower scoring match. But as her coach was saying, if when she opens up, she doesn't always, but she can just dominate, and I think you saw that in the final.
Yeah, Delran has another athlete, Callie Roscos, who is another legacy wrestler. Her dad wrestled and ended up wrestling. I think he was even the team captain at Princeton. When he wrestled.
Yeah, she was a state finalist last year, and then this year won the region, and then she lost to Katrina Kling. So it was a 6-5. That was a great semifinal. But that was like another one of those really good weight classes where you had Pipkins and Kling and Roscoe's, who had all been state finalists before.
Yeah, I think that's what's great is that now in its third year, even though it's still in its nascent stages, but in its third year, now we're actually looking at this and being able to say, this weight class is going to be stacked for the next couple of years. And it's so exciting to be able to see, you mentioned it before, but to start seeing these loaded brackets where I think what it does for the sport, even though it shouldn't have to, is it lets people know that for a female to become a state champion in New Jersey, it's tough in its own ways, like it is to be a boy and to become a state champ in New Jersey. Like it should come with its own seal of credibility. It's not just that you happen to get there and you beat a scrub kid,
Right. Yeah, there's definitely a lot more depth and a lot of, like you said, girls who have been doing this for a long time. You're right, that first year, I mean, though we did have those elite athletes and kids have been at it a long time. There were girls that made the state finals that were first year wrestlers. Girls that won the state championship that were first year wrestlers. And I think as we go on, even though that maybe doesn't happen to that degree on the boys side. You get like a, you know, big athletic kid that maybe comes out and you know, makes some noise at 220 or whatever. But you know, I think you'll see more of that, that the girls that are finishing in those top 4 spots are the girls that, you know, have been doing it for a long time, who started at a young age and who now also put in the time in the off season.
Yeah. Well, in true New Jersey fashion, it obviously did not disappoint. So,
No, not at
Bill,
all.
thanks so much for taking some time with me this morning and being on the show. I know you had a long day yesterday, so we'll cut you loose so that you can go enjoy the rest of your weekend.
No problem. It was a pleasure being on. It was a great tournament yesterday. Glad that they were able to pull it off. You know, all off season, what everybody in the wrestling community, boys and girls, said is like, just the most important thing is that we crown state champions. You know, we got to crown 11 girls yesterday. You know, in 2 weeks we should be able to crown 14 boys. So even though it's been a very strange and different year, I think that in the end game they got what they were looking for.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again so much for being here.
Sure.
I appreciate it.
Ron, take care.
All right, take care.